This is an interview with Ms. Leona Early for the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute's Oral History Project. I'm Dr. Horace Huntley. We're presently at the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute. Today is March 28, 1997. Ms. Early, I'd like to thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come and talk with us today.
You're welcome.
Yes, ma'am.
Have to do so.
Yes. Were you born in Birmingham?
No,
Where's your home, your birthplace?
Beloit, Alabama,
Lord,
10 miles out of Selma.
Oh,
That was kind
okay. And how long were you in Beloit? Were you a very young child when you were brought to Birmingham?
No, my parents moved from Beloit to Oregon, which was just about 4 miles away.
Right.
And I attended school in Selma
I see.
and finished high school there.
I see. Okay.
It was only later that my parents moved here. But after finishing high school, I came here to Booker T. Washington Business College. And when I finished there, I went to Washington, D.C.
Okay. All right. Your parents, tell me just a bit about your parents. What were their educational levels, first of all?
All right. My mother had attended painting school there in Selma, and she taught about 3 years out at the Lord.
I see.
And my father was a farmer, but his parents owned property there in Beloit. Beloit is a very interesting little place. After the Reconstruction years,
Yes, ma'am.
the Beloit College out in Wisconsin sent a philanthropist by the name of Charles Curtis to the South to buy up property and sell that to blacks very cheaply. And many families bought up, black families bought up all of the property around that little area called Beloit, Alabama. And it was named for Beloit, Wisconsin.
Oh, is that right? That's
Yes.
very interesting.
Yes,
So that information is passed down through the generation.
that's right, that's right.
Well, Beloit then would be like a sister city to Beloit, Wisconsin.
That's right, that's right. And 2 years ago, several students came down from Beloit, Wisconsin to tour the place and to give money to help to set up some foundations there.
Is there any industry in Beloit?
None, because the farming is just tobacco.
I see.
So people only have gardens and maybe plant corn or something like that. But there's no industry as such there. So people have to go to Selma and other places for their livelihood.
Do you know how much land your grandparents actually owned?
Well, they said it was 40 acres and a mule.
40
They
acres.
said that's what they sold to each family.
Okay.
And my father's father had 2 brothers. And of course, they bought property side by side.
Hmm.
You know, so they had at least, what does that be, 120 acres and 3 mules perhaps.
Right. Yes. So now that's very interesting because of course you know the vast majority of people of African descent did not receive that 40 acres.
That's true, that's true.
So was Beloit then, was it a black town?
Yes, totally so.
Totally black. And,
Yes.
and the property, all the people that were all of you that there, were they property owners, all of them?
Yes, all of them were. And the families were very closely connected though. Now, one of my father's uncles had a gin house. So he ginned the cotton for the people who raised cotton. Another of the brothers had what they called a grits mill. for the corn,
Right,
for meal, and another had syrup. So the families got along very well. They raised cattle, swine, whatnot. Wish you could go down sometime just to see the place.
Do you go
It's
back?
Oh yes, oh yes.
Well,
yes.
what is it like now? Is it
It's
still
not like-
owned?
It is not like very much now. The property is still in the main owned by the children and the
Right.
grandchildren.
The property that your family owns is still in your family.
Yes, oh yes.
Mhm.
Because when my father moved to Oregon, it was because his mother was aging and she needed one of her daughters to take care of her there in the home house. And my mother being the daughter-in-law, he thought it better for his sister, one of his sisters to be there with her. But the property is still in the family. And then,
And is most of that property still owned by black people?
yes, most of it is still owned by blacks.
Because there have been efforts
Yes,
throughout the years
Yes.
to get some of that property back by
yes,
whites.
yes.
That has not been successful in the north.
One of my father's uncles, well, he only had 2 children, a son and a daughter. The daughter only had 2 children, but the son had 5 children by the first marriage and 8 by the second marriage. So there's a little feud going on now there between them about what to do about their property there. But they do have sense enough to keep the taxes up, so no one else will steal it.
That's great. Yeah, that's something that's very interesting, and I have not even heard of that. I've heard of the law, I guess, but I didn't know anything about it. But this is some very rich history that we need to investigate.
Oh, yes, yes.
Tell me about your siblings. How many children were in your family?
There were 3 boys and myself,
Okay. And where were you in that group? Were you
the baby.
You were the baby.
Yes.
So I'm sure they spoiled you.
Well, my older brother was 17 years old and living in Milwaukee, Wisconsin when I was born. So the others are just 2 years apart, so I was way down. They didn't have a chance to spoil me very much because they were soon out of the
Yes.
house.
Did his going to Milwaukee have anything to do with the relationship between Beloit, Wisconsin and Beloit, Alabama?
No, it didn't. No. He went there for a job. He had gone down to Tuskegee and taken what they call a short course, and he found out he could get a good job out there. So that was took care of him and 1 or 2 other young men.
Where did you start elementary school?
Right there at Beloit.
What was that experience like? You're starting to school.
I tell you what, I don't know very much about the experience other than my brother came down from Wisconsin and enrolled me when I was 5 years old because my birth month is November. And when I was 5 in November, he came down in January and enrolled me in school. I said, well, she was born in 1925, so 5 from, 11. So, but my mother kept me on the go. When I finished the 2nd grade, I went to Leona Academy in the 3rd grade because I had a relative there whose husband was a minister and pastoring the First Baptist Church there. They had 1 daughter and they wanted some company for the daughter, so they begged my mother to let me come and stay with them. So I was there for the 3rd grade and then back to Oregon for the 4th and 5th grades. Finished the 6th grade out at Birmingham because my other 2 brothers by this time were working out there.
And that's in Birmingham.
Yes, yes. And then to Knox Academy and so.
And Knox Academy, was that a high school? Or there was a boarding school?
No, it had become public school.
Okay.
It had been a private school run by the Lutherans.
Yes. Okay. And what do you remember about your experiences at Knox Academy? Were you active in any extracurricular activities?
Well, yes, I played basketball. And I was one of the outstanding students because the principal was in my family.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody bothered with me, so.
Yes.
And I made very good grades, was exempted from examinations in chemistry and physics.
Mm-hmm.
So I had an interesting life there, but I wasn't allowed to go to dances.
Tell me then about, you were living now in Selma, right? And this is in the Black Belt. Were there ever any incidents that you remember, racial incidents of that time?
Oh, yes. Now, this was before my time, because I think this happened maybe about 1927 or 28, but I heard my mother talk about Dr. Sullivan, who lived there.
In Selma?
Yes, in Selma. And he was a relative of the Sullivans here. Dave Sullivan,
Yes, sure.
great grand uncle or something of that order.
Right.
And my mother said a very fine looking man of fair complexion. And he was killed there in his survey.
In his
Buddy,
okay.
they called him Sir because she said he had a fancy one, he was Sir. And he was killed. And they seem to have thought that there was some jealousy because he had accumulated little wealth. And the city of Selma needed some money and they borrowed $10,000 from him and didn't want to pay it back. So he was killed. But at that time, you were not allowed to, if you knew anything, you were afraid to tell it.
Mm-hmm.
So if somebody saw what happened, they were afraid to tell it because who were you going to tell it to? The judge was probably the killer's relative.
Why was he killed?
Well, as I said, my mother said they didn't want to pay
They
him
want
his
to repay
money
him.
back. Yes, and I'm sure that he raised some sad about that and may have had a confrontation with some of the officials or something.
He may have become uppity then.
Yes, and then there was some other involvements they thought, between the doctor and some other person with another expression.
Mm-hmm. A white woman?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And of course that was
Yeah,
several.
they said that was really the main reason also that money.
Right. Yes. There are stories like that throughout our past that passed down, but they're never really reported.
That's right.
In
That's right.
history makers.
Yes, because when I was in the 11th grade, when the Christmas holidays came, we went home for holidays. A young lady who was in my class, her old sister got married on Christmas Day. Lived 1 week, and somebody set the house afire that she was living in with her husband. Husband left very early that morning going to work. And it is said that somebody said they saw this white woman go in the house that morning. And then later, she just burned to death in the house. Set her on that. Somebody set her afire.
And this is when you were in 11th grade.
Yes. So naturally, children hear their parents talking. And when we got back to school and heard this, we said, oh my goodness. She was a very beautiful girl. And more so than the younger ones. And we always thought that her mother dressed her finely, more so than she did the other children. And she wore fine jewelry and furs and everything. And we thought that was the parents doing that. And when this happened, then the people said, no, that was that man all the time doing that. And he didn't want her to get married. And she got married. You know, she got married.
So was this in Beloit or
No,
in
this is
Selma?
in Selma.
This is in Selma.
In Selma. A thing like this would hardly have happened at Beloit. Those people were so closely knit there that one would have to kill out a whole community because they were each other's keepers.
So there's a difference in Beloit,
Yes.
community in Beloit and community in Selma.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Beloit was more rural.
That's
and
right. That's
so
right.
therefore people would be
That's right.
closer. Yes.
Sure. And speaking of the Lord, in 1961, I had a relative whose son was in school at downstate, it was called. And he was with the sit-in demonstrators. His dad had a service station and a grocery store right on the corner of Highway 22 and the highway that goes to Cahaba, Alabama. And was doing very good, making very good living for his family there. When they identified this son as being one of the demonstrators at City and County, they boycotted him, wouldn't let the gas trucks sell gas, couldn't buy groceries wholesale. And he owned quite a bit of property there on that corner around.
This is in Beloit.
Yes, this was in Beloit, but in later years.
Right.
After these original families had more or less died out, you know. But these other, this cousin was grandson of the original Twerking. And what happened? Some whites came out one night to my cousin's home looking for this son. But his mother had just sent him on to Kansas City, Missouri, to a cousin that we had there to take care of him until things quieted down, they thought.
Now, is this the son this is not the son from Tuskegee? The one from Tuskegee, this is...
No. This, the one who was a demonstrator.
Right, yes.
No, he was at downstate.
Okay.
And when they had the sit-in demonstration there, he was one of those who demonstrated. Okay, that's why they boycotted this family and came looking for him. They knew that was
they came looking for him on that property.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right. Came out to his dad's home.
Yes.
And he wasn't out there. Well, then the family had to just leave the room. But they were fortunate enough to get a good sale for their home house and sold off some lots for other people to build homes. And they went on to Kansas City and were able to have the money to pay down on the home there. And they're living in that home now. But this son finished University of Kansas, and he was very gifted in music because he was already taking music since he was small. And he he taught for about 3 years. Then he got a job with IBM, making like $35,000 a year, I think he said. And they moved him to Dallas, Texas, and raised his salary to $50,000. Then they moved him to Houston at an increased salary. And when he moved to Marietta, Georgia, he didn't tell what his salary was anymore. And he was with them for 25 years, and last year he retired. And he's already in the ministry. He went into the ministry and was pastoring a church out at Woodstock, Georgia. And it's just, he comes over here quite often. And it's
What's his name?
Carl Moore.
Carl Moore.
Carl Anthony Moore. And it's always a joy for me to see him because I know the story. I know what he went through. And his wife is thinking about retiring, but she is the nurse for the city schools of Atlanta. So they didn't do that. His 3 sisters, all of them got a good education. And the brothers, and all of them are doing real well. After the dad got out there, he got a job at the PS and made money, and then he retired from the government. So it was a blessing in disguise.
Tell me, what did you do after finishing high school?
Well, after finishing the business college, because immediately after finishing high school, I came on here and did a 2-year course in a year and a half at the business college.
Why did you come to Birmingham? Did you come to Birmingham specifically to go to business college?
Yes.
Did you have relatives here?
All of my brothers were living here that
I
time.
see.
So Mrs. Gaston had maneuvered with the government to place those of us who could pass the civil service exam in government jobs in Washington. So I was one of those persons who made a nice, they say, high score, and went on there at the job waiting and also the room and everything. So several of us went.
So how long did you live there?
Oh, I lived in Washington 12 years. Yes.
What was that transition like from living in Beloit to Selma to Birmingham and finally to Washington, D.C.?
In 1945, Washington, D.C. was a southern town. And there were some things that you could do, but you couldn't eat in those cafeterias, not even in the government buildings. So I was one of those to fall out one day and have to break that up, you know. So hungry, I had to move, you see, work for the government at that time.
Sure.
And it was interesting because I helped 11 young ladies to march on the Thompson restaurant and break down segregation in all 18 places. Belton Lawson was the attorney for the case. And when he won the case, it was just marvelous. All of this was happening. Well, this was 52. And then a couple of years later, when the Brown versus the Board of Education case, all of these things were breaking together. And then when I came back here in 56, there was no problem. I was glad that the movement was in progress. Now, well,
So did you get involved with the movement as soon as you were there in 1956?
Oh, yes.
What was that like?
Let me tell you, Pinky Shortridge and Yvonne Turner got me involved because they were already working for the Booker T. Washington Insurance Company. And when I came back here, I was secretary to Dr. Gaston in the AME Church Extension Department. I had headed up a campaign for him to be elected to that office. As a matter of fact, I was the person who wrote him to throw his hat in the ring because the doctor there, who was the physician for the secretary treasurer at that time, had told me that he wouldn't be able to run again because his pneumonia had affected his mind. So I knew that Dr. Jasper was active with the AME Church and wanted the general office. They had promised him the treasurership, but they double-crossed him on that. So when the doctor told me this, I said, oh, I know a man. He said, y'all better get somebody like that. And Dr. Jasper talked with his bishop, and he said, oh, no, they won't give you that. They need a preacher in that spot that can go around and preach at the churches. And he told me that, he wouldn't go. I grabbed my discipline, and I saw there on page 469 of that particular discipline, it said all you had to do to run for that office was to be 21 years of age and over, and in good standing with your church. I quoted the page to Dr. Jasper. He said, oh, I'm going to run. When you had on the campaign.
So he did run.
Dr. Austin Mitchell and I happened to have been lucky enough to be appointed tellers. And all night that night. And early in the morning, like 4 o'clock, when other people guys were asleep to even count the vote. He won.
You won.
And so upon winning, he said to me, he said, well, now, I don't have time to fool with that department. You're going to have to run it for me. I said, oh, my goodness, I have my hands full already. I have a beauty shop in Washington, but I was not a beautician. I was in products and interested in experiments and all. So my father died in 55. So my mother was alone there in the house. And I decided that it would be a good idea for me to ask him, or tell him maybe that I would like to come home. And he said, oh, I've been thinking about that because, to fly way up here just a scientist and all, So in October of 56, I moved the church extension department here on the airplane.
You really held the fire, oh man.
All that brought was the checkmate because we had typewriters and every other type of equipment that we needed.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a 3-story building there, which was a building that his grandson brother lived in when he went there for law school at college. So it was all in all enjoyable. I got married while there. My husband died. He was in med school. We had 2. I didn't quite get over that yet. Not yet. But all in all, I enjoyed Washington because it was not anything like the big cities of today. And you could go anywhere over Washington or Virginia or out of Maryland that you wanted to, and you were pretty safe. So,
Well, at the time that you returned to Birmingham, you returned in 56 or 57?
56, October of 56.
Yeah, well, in December of 56, Fred Shuttlesworth's home and church was bombed.
Yes. Listen here. And I know the fellow, we called him Will, who was on guard over there at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish you could have met him to hear him tell the story. But only the Lord moved and saved the people. Mm-hmm. But we have been through something here. I know the very night that Dr. King came to town and had the meeting at 16th Street. But Shuttlesworth had done so much work here to make it possible for Dr. King to come in because this had been a terrible town.
Sure. Birmingham was the toughest town in the country.
Oh, yes.
You attended the mass meetings.
Every night.
Can you describe to me what a mass meeting was like?
Let me tell you, indescribable. You sit there, well, being with the housing authority during the 60s, I had to sort of disguise myself, but while I was with Dr. Gaston, it wasn't easy because, he was telling me, don't you get in trouble with it. I was laughing with Yvonne Turner a few days ago when they met at the Kelly Park. to board the buses. Doc's window was in the A.L. Smith building, overlooking down 17th. Doc looked out the window, and he thought that was me, he recognized me. And Mary Fryson told me later on, he called him, Miss Riley, that little girl out there. She said she claimed she couldn't hardly make out whether it was me or not, but I'm sure she told me, yeah, that was her.
But he didn't want you to be involved in that because he didn't want you to
Get hurt.
hurt.
Yeah. And he knew that I was not the type of somebody hit me now. That, wait a minute, they done wrong. He knew that wasn't going to work.
Mm.
But it was enjoyable. Now, you wanted to know what it felt like sitting there in the church in mass meeting.
Right.
Okay. If you could imagine yourself being a cult follower,
Mm.
then you could get the feeling of it. When I heard the other day about those people, 39 people who had
Right.
gone to sleep, I said to myself, if even Fred Schultzworth or Dr. King had told us to go to sleep, I wouldn't be here today.
Mm.
That's what it was like.
It's just that powerful.
Yes, in the meeting, and thanks to Carlton Reese and Bernard Sneed, great musicians on the piano and organ. They had these songs that would just get you aroused, and you sort of went out of it. See what I mean?
Yes.
You were not your normal self as you were 12 o'clock the day before. All right, once you were out of it, they kept saying, my feet are getting tickled. I feel like marching. Me too. Everybody felt like marching.
It was infectious.
That's right. When you knew anything, you were on the streets. And it did not matter how cold it was. You were willing to get out there because you had been depressed so long, all of your life. And you knew that if it was to come, you were going to have to help to make it come. That is why when I see our politicians playing games at these city halls, not just ours, anywhere, as serious as the matter is, it sort of shakes me. They have a great job that they should be about. All of the bickering among themselves ought to go on behind closed doors. They don't go to each other's homes. Now, like on the Max board, Sir Von called us every resign Tuesday, effective as of next Tuesday, which I would have my resignation in. Reverend Tommy Lewis, our chairman, heard about it, came to the maximum Wednesday, because now it's you're not going to get off this board till all of us get off it, go on off together. And I understand he has written Roosevelt Bell a letter telling him that what I said down there was no longer what was on the mouth. I told him, like I said, tell one thing. I'm not going down there till the space goes away. But anyway, the way that we have handled things, when we had an issue coming up that we knew some of us might be divided on, we said, Tommy, we'll be out to your church at 5:30 or 6 o'clock. Tuesday evening, we're going to go over this mess and get ourselves together so when we get in the meeting Wednesday, we will be together.
Right.
There'll be other folk not knowing where we are. This is what I figure that our council people should do. Get together. Even if they don't like each other that well, they got to serve together. Forget the dislikes and work for the people who elected them. The people had faith in them to elect them. And when the mayor told me he's not gonna run again, I see now it might have been his condition. You'll find out today just what. But I certainly hope he won't give this thing up now.
It's very difficult for him to give it up now.
Goodness, oh yeah,
Some of that's right.
almost impossible for him to walk away from this now. That's what they're waiting for. So I said, dead or alive, stay there. He said, well, you'll have almost killed me already. I want to tell you, when you have fuel home down there.
That's right. Need be.
That's right, that's right. So it was, okay,
Were you ever arrested?
no. I was
But you did demonstrate.
I did demonstrate. Now, I was not arrested on this, in the case of civil rights.
Mhm.
But there came a group that called themselves the United Stores and Incorporated.
United Stores.
Stores Incorporated, headed up by Reverend Joel Marshall. I got involved because I saw the need for blacks to have something of their own that they could pool their resources and run. And I didn't sell any stock, but some of the board members began selling some stock, which we had been told by the attorney, who was very prominent here in the city now, that he had registered the stock. And we had no reason to disbelieve him because they had paid him the amount of money that he said it cost. And come to find out it had not been registered. And although I hadn't sold any stock, I was just as guilty as those who had. So they were talking about getting a lawyer for everybody. And I said, let me get my own attorney. Your attorney might not be my attorney. But my case was null crossed because one of my brothers had a friend who was the cook and the seamstress for Judge William Barber's wife. He was just an attorney here. Now there were two Barber brothers here, attorneys. I don't know whether that's David's dad or his uncle. But anyway, she told him about my situation. And he told her to tell him to come back to his office. He wanted to talk with me because all the attorneys were keeping up with the case. And when I told him I hadn't sold any stock and I wasn't at the meeting when they voted to sell the stock and so forth and so on, he had my case law promise. Go on about your business. So it has been necessary through the years for blacks to have some white friends. We wouldn't be free today if we hadn't had some white friends. But sometimes now you wonder, where are they?
Sure.
But I felt a little better about it when Alexis Herman was confirmed the other day. I felt better about it because I had prayed. So I know her personally and attended church with her on one occasion when I was in Washington for a MAX meeting, transportation meeting. And she has worked with us with the National Business League. And I know she is a fine person. So it may not be quite as bad as it seems. We have to maneuver and keep some of them on our side.
Sure.
We must do that. Yeah, because, we're lost without our
Right. What do you think is going to be the final outcome of what we're doing with the educational system here in Birmingham?
I'm not so clear on what they're doing. The reason I'm not so clear, every time I get this bit, then something else comes out, and then I find out that when I found out the other day about Sharon Bell, oh my goodness, I was floored because I'm not looking at her as a person, I'm looking at William, who has aspirations out here. Well, he's a dead doctor. Behind that, because that is his wife. So I just think that the whole thing, because we don't know how much of this has been going on, because I know years ago, when we put the first assistant superintendent down there, Mrs. Ruth Jackson and Miss Nichols grabbed me one day and said, Leona, get to him. They knew he was big time EMU. He worked with us in the lay organization, was our president and everything. And I was his secretary. Said, get to him and tell him.
Who was this? The superintendent.
Assistant superintendent.
Oh.
Knox. Courtesy.
Yes.
And said, tell him to do something about this vital situation. There's too much noise out here about it. Well, I don't know whether he could do anything about what they were doing about butter at that time. But if something was going on then about butter, I'm just saying if, then something was going on about bread and other things. So I'm wondering if we have been fleeced.
What was, so that as we talk about this, you're talking about butter. Tell me a little about that.
Oh, they were saying, well, at that time, people were getting hold of butter out there. They
From
didn't-
the school system.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. They're getting butter out of the lunchroom.
Oh, I see.
And they sort of figured that somebody up high had to be behind it for it to be as widespread as it was.
So you're saying if that was happening with butter, there
Then-
are other commodities
Yeah,
that it
that's
probably was happening to as
So
well.
I'm wondering if we have been fleeced out of business.
Now that's a very significant point.
Yeah,
That's a
sure.
very significant point because we cannot figure. See, I was not aware of the butter situation, so
Yeah.
I've not been able to figure where all of this is going. But that does open up a new avenue.
That's right. If that was happening then, way back there then,
And how long ago was this?
this was in the early 70s, early 70s, early 70s.
So over a period of time, you're talking about nearly 20 years.
Yeah.
And that had become commonplace.
That's right. That's
Yeah.
right. Sure.
That's interesting.
So I am thinking that the money has been there all the time. The money has been there, but possibly not used in the right way to last. And if you don't use money right, it will get away, and you won't get the benefit, and you'll have to make other arrangements or go out of business. So it seems that we don't know how we have business unless we can get an infusion of new money from somewhere. It's tragic.
It is. Because we're paying for the sins of our fathers and mothers.
That's right. That's what it comes to. Surely.
Well, you said that you had put in your resignation. But you won't be back on Tuesday. But it sounds as if you will reconsider.
Yes, it sounds as though Reverend Lewis has contacted Roosevelt Bell. And I guess Bell will be calling me, asking me, what's going on here?
Why did you decide to resign?
All right, there were several reasons. I guess sometimes I turn up at places that should be somewhere else. But I'm on the Urban Impact Board and Secretary of Urban. And they asked us who wanted tickets for the Mayor's Conference on Economic Development. I said, how much I did? Said $15. I said, include me, so I wrote a check for $15. I turned up there, the city center that month. And this gentleman from Atlanta was talking about regionalizing everything, including the city, just having one big county.
Mm.
And I said, no, this would never work. But he had already stated he didn't know anything about Birmingham. He'd never really been here before. He might have passed through here in the air. And he said a lot of things that I knew would not work here. So,
Like what, for instance?
okay. He said that if we regionalize everything and not have a city per se, it would be better for everybody. Be better for housing and jobs, and then some other things would be better for everybody. Well, anyway, when he finished, and some people asked questions after question and answer period, I just had to make a comment. I couldn't sit there any longer. So I said to him, I said, Doctor, I don't have a question, but I do have a few comments, if you please. And I started out by telling him, the 29 years I worked for the Birmingham Housing Authority after I left Dr. Jasper, was with them 6 years. I said, when I first went there, we had 3 so-called projects. I said, but as soon as we integrated housing, those people disappeared. I said, we didn't know where those people went, but they left housing projects. I said, and about 5 years later, we found out that they had connected up with something called rural housing, and were out in Birmingham and in Shelby County and everywhere in the rural areas, living in fine apartments and houses that rented for $700 and $800 a month, of which they were only paying anywhere from $60 to $75, $80 with utilities included.
Mm-hmm.
I said, and when we tried to get some of the blacks out there, couldn't even qualify for Section 8. I said, so for this reason, I am sorry. I cannot go along with you about regionalizing these cities. We worked too hard with voter registration to get these people elected. I said, we will not have one elected official if we go through regionalizing everything.
So you're suggesting that regionalizing would take control out of the city?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, definitely.
So,
We wouldn't have any representation because you see, more of them, they're out there in the group.
right.
They wouldn't vote out blacks in office.
Mm-hmm.
See, so we would have no representation whatsoever. Now, when I finished, Leonard Cohen got here and sanctioned what I have said. Plus, she pointed out some other things. And she mentioned now, all that I did not mention, transportation, she did. She said, these areas out here that you're talking about won't even come up with a few dollars to help with transportation, to get the people out there to jobs. Well, now, the mayor has gone along with regionalization for whatever reason, for transit. Now, the burden, I know that the burden of the whole thing is going to be on Birmingham, but the benefit is going to be split up. And I'm afraid it's going to be split up so bad that we won't even have any buses around here now. People get to the doctor, or to school, or church, wherever.
Did you talk with the mayor about this decision?
No, I didn't. Because I didn't get a report of his decision until day or two before that. And he's hard to get up with. That I said, oh, usually when I need to talk to him, I go by the funeral home, tell Rachel, tell your husband I need to see him by such and such time, which I did prior to the Tuesday week ago. And Tuesday at the council, I tipped down there and said, did Rachel tell you? Not only did Rachel tell me 5 times, you see me, that she has asked me 10 times, have I called you yet? So I said, don't let me have to come over there on Heritage Night, yes, because you know I will. But I think he is tired of fighting. And
Long time.
yeah,
And at that level, for that length of time.
that's right. I can understand being worn out. Just more or less don't care no more. You know, think about myself now.
Sure.
Yeah. I mean, he's thinking about himself. And rightfully so.
So it's fine.
But I would hate to see these people not have, but these folks, they don't want to even pay the little money they're supposed to pay. And we had to, they sued us about 3 years in 1993. City Councilman, Fairfield, joined in with all my group and sued us, claiming that we had charged them too much or something. So we had to countersue. And the thing went on and on. Last week, we got a judgment against us. Well, Bessemer came in. They took their suit out, and so did Fairfield, and those others. So we got judgment of $250,000. So they don't mean anything for the poor people. But those of us who know better, we have to express the difference. These people who have had or have not had, I'm talking about some blacks, when they get where they maybe pay for their phones and can afford their 2 or 3 cars, they don't much care anymore about that. And there again, at my church, I say all the time, don't tell me about the 10% to the Lord. Don't wash my face with the Lord. I said, I know about the Lord. And I know what you are supposed to be about with this money that you take in from poor people. But when I see what you're doing with the money, it turns me off. I said, when I see this little old lady here who didn't get her check, but her rent needs to be paid, it's getting cold and her gas is off. My money is not too good to help her. But if I give it all to you in the church, knowing you're not going to help her, I wouldn't have it to help her. I was in a seminar in Memphis, Tennessee, some 7 years ago. And it was a stewardship seminar. And they had big wigs from all over the connection, all over the country. Their election, about 10% that belongs to God. It's just not yours in the first place. So I just got up to me. When the last speaker sat down, I hit the floor, raised my hand, they put me down. I said, maybe my job is a hazard because I work among poor people. That I have to put that with my money. I said, I don't put any percentage on what that is. I said, you talk about giving God 10%. I said, I got news for you. I wouldn't mind giving God 80, 100% of what he gives me. If I had any way to get it to him. Toward me.
Now that is saying a lot. That is saying an awful lot.
So many people came to me at that session. Ministers too. Said, lady, I just want to tell you.
If I had a conduit. Yes, indeed.
But it's certainly not you. Can't say anything about you, because you're going to tell them about you. Can't imagine. I said, we're hung up on bricks and mortar, but not people.
Which is true.
So, I'm thinking that when these folks vote to elect their school board, I believe it'll be better. I believe, because I've watched what went on. I think it was the last appointment to the board. And I tell you that just shouldn't have happened. They're a good friend of mine, but I suffer loss. You know, so, some things you might feel, but you don't say.
Ms. Early, you've been very, very helpful today. You've covered an awful lot of different the Lord. I've learned about the Lord today, all the way to the bus system and school system here in Birmingham. So I'm certain that this will be a real help to us, to help us to understand how we've gotten from point A to point B.
Yes.
So, thank you so much.
You're so welcome. All right, and thank you for having